Hey there, welcome to another episode of Behind the Mask. I am your host, Sarah Joy, your friendly neighborhood interrogator turned clone, helping you to get to know who the person is behind the screen name. Tonight, we are chatting with, oh my gosh, no, David. Oh my gosh, David. Sorry. I get
That's
really good at names and then I forget them last minute. David, who we have already been having a delightful chat with, so we're gonna kind of like pick up halfway in the middle. But you might know David from Princess Guard and the Verbs system, the VRBF, which have both been played here on the Netcast Creative server. So, of course, you're here in our server because you love games, and we love games too, and we love game designers. And we are excited that David is both a game designer and here on our server. So, David,
yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Me.
Ooh.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm a game designer by night. Probably pretty literally by night, because that's when I actually have the time to sit down and do stuff and create.
Nice.
Um, During the day, I work in technology, and I've done everything from building and leading teams to hands-on software engineering, and right now I'm in a hands-on role, which has been
Oh
delightful.
boy.
Uh,
Yep.
and I am the parent of three small children who keep me very busy during the non-nighttime, post-bedtime hours. Or
So
pre-bedtime.
then, quite literally, the only time you have is in the wee hours of the morning.
Yes. Yes.
So, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, awesome. So this is how the world knows you is IT tech, which I'm also in.
Oh,
No, that's
yes.
super
Yes.
fun. Yes, as you can tell from my cyber background.
Yes, indeed.
Um, so yeah, oh my gosh, I've got so many questions for you. We had first started talking, and I wanna pick up from where we were at. We were talking about collections, and
Mm.
you have a very interesting collection, friend. Can you tell us about your collection?
Yes. As I had mentioned, back in the era of disposable income pre-children, I started collecting fountain pens. I had a coworker who used fountain pens, and I had always been interested in calligraphy, and she introduced me to that, and I was like, oh, well, okay, I'll go get a not cheap, but not by no means expensive pen as my first starter pen, and then I started to use it and began to appreciate the craft of writing and how just the physical act of writing can be more than just scribbling things on paper. There's an art
Mhm.
to it and a level of craftsmanship that you can bring to it. And that you experience with a fountain pen just because of the nature of the device, right? So
Mhm.
you have to consider the ink that you're using. You have to consider how you're loading the pen. You have to, there's a manual process. It's much like making a cup of tea or being really into coffee or something and doing pour overs and things like that, where
Mhm.
you're filling your fountain pen and you're cleaning it, and it brings you in touch with the instrument in a way that a disposable pen doesn't. Um, and then, of course, once you get into the pens, then you have to get into the paper because the paper matters. You have to get into the ink because the ink matters. And then it's this giant spiral. And then you buy one, and then you have like 50. And
Mhm.
they unfortunately do not multiply like tribbles. One has to go out and acquire them, and they range from fairly cheap to fairly not cheap at the high end. And so I have a nice collection of those, a large collection of fountain pen ink. Um, the paper I have mostly donated to my children at this point. I'm not ready to hand them a bottle of ink and say, go to town.
Yeah.
Uh,
But this paper, I'm assuming, is kind of like vellum, like more expensive.
yeah, yeah, it typically
And you're
isn't
like,
dated.
"Here, kids, I love you this much."
Yeah,
It's amazing.
right. I mean, especially when one has three children and the wee hours of the night are the only time to be creative. Um, the notebooks just sit there unused, and I want to encourage
Okay.
their creativity. So, I
Uh,
give them paper, I give them markers and all sorts of stuff. And I had these things sitting around, and they're like, "Oh, cool! I've got Daddy's notebook, and I can do that kind of stuff." And it's neat to see that. And then they go and they make books and they do other things. So
oh,
they're
that's
being put
amazing.
they're being put to good use.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. My the miser in me was just like each piece of that paper. It's worth it for children's
That's
creativity.
right. Exactly. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So there are other things that you can do with pens. We were briefly
Right.
talking beforehand. You were into calligraphy.
Yeah. So I did fountain pen reviews and ink reviews, and part of doing the ink review was then loading up my pen and doing calligraphy. And so there are pens, just like regular pens. You can have different widths of
Mhm.
your nibs can have different widths, and you can go from very extra fine to very juicy big thing that looks like you're writing with a marker. And then there are ones specifically made for more um, calligraphy oriented stuff. So you get stub nibs, which are wide and give you that very like marker or brush kind of feel to it. And then there's one specifically made for calligraphy. So what I would do is I would load up my pens. I would try out an ink, see how I liked it. I would test it on like a dozen different types of paper to see how it reacted with each one. Um, and then if you use a really juicy nib that gives off a lot of ink and a really nice paper, you can get cool shading effects. And there are even some inks that have sheening effects to them. And so all of this stuff um, I would put into creating these exemplars of the ink. And so it gave me an excuse to practice the calligraphy and then to sort of write out the how the ink performed and do it up sort of artsy fartsy. And then I would post that in an actual written review on my blog and people could go read it and see how it performed and all that stuff. So
Does this blog still exist?
it does. It has not been updated in a while, mostly
That's okay.
because with gaming stuff, I'm posting most of that stuff to my gaming site. Blog is still
Mhm.
out there. It's carpedavid.com.
CarpeDavid.com. I'm
Yeah,
posting it in the chat
okay. uh,
because I want to see it later.
yeah, and it actually still gets routine traffic because I built
Oh,
up this
nice.
nice little database of ink
Mhm.
reviews, and ink mostly doesn't change from year to year. So
Oh,
whatever I
good.
had reviewed still remains relevant to people out there trying to select new ink. So that's fun.
That's so interesting, especially with technology and working in the technology field. You know that things are constantly changing and
Mhm.
updating.
For sure.
So, like to have Ink's formula stay the same consistently for so long, that's really fascinating. It's
Mhm.
not something that we tend to see in our culture.
No, no, it's the opposite of planned obsolescence. It's
Yes.
yeah, you buy one and then you hand it down to your children, which is not really how at least American culture tends to function.
Definitely not how computers or phones work.
No, no, no.
Oh, so interesting. So, one thing with calligraphy, folks, I was telling everybody, or I was telling David beforehand, my friend is really big into calligraphy, and y'all gather together in these groups and like write words on paper. And these
Yeah,
are the fanciest words in paper you have ever seen. Like, it's beautiful. I was like, I've never thought of words as art. But I'm curious. So, for those of you who don't know, David has written a bunch of RPGs. Um, has that experience with the words influenced your system, the verb system, where you look and examine words in a different way?
yeah, and that is a very interesting question because
Mhm.
until you asked it right before we jumped on here, I had
Right.
never
And we
actually
were like, oh crap, I've got to go live.
right,
We
never
need
made that connection. It's like, but I think
to.
so because it like you said, we write words, right? And I have done that too. I will just practice a word until I get the form of the word right. Put little flourishes where I want them and things like that. And that has certainly factored into how I do things like do the graphic design or do logo design or things like that. But yeah, it makes you think about words as a thing, right? It's and the verb system is based on verbs. It's an action-oriented system. It's your characters are defined by the verbs on their character sheet. So, um, there are some other principles that went into designing it too, like learning through failure. So, learning through trial and error, which is basically how humans learn,
Mhm.
and working as a team, the value of working as a team. Um, but yeah, the idea of just taking that and reducing the majority of the system to just these verbs or the definition of your character, I do think that that was probably influenced by, because that experience of just practicing a word makes you think about that word on its own and what it means and how it has, you know, the context and the all the meaning that comes with that word and how that then interacts with the other words. But you can sort of abstract that out and deal with that on its own.
Mhm. It's almost like having a moving meditation on one word and the meaning of one word for long periods of time.
Yeah, and yes, I think most of the creative things I do uh, have a meditative aspect to them in some way, shape, or form. For calligraphy, it was origami, and
Mm.
so the folding of the paper has this sort of meditative, repetitive act to it. Um, also done painting and poetry and short stories and all sorts of other stuff as well. And
You have.
the thing that I love the most about it is that feeling of flow that you get when you really, which I mean, people who are in technology also are very fortunate in many cases to be able to get that flow state going when you're in the middle of coding something and then you look up and it's an hour later and you're like, what happened? How did that? Um, I feel that same way after a good writing session, uh, or the where it just feels like you're in the process of doing and you can just sit back and do as opposed to having to sit there and think about it and worry about it and you know get our silly human brains all into dither.
Love that. I love that. So I'm really curious. You didn't just wake up one day and you were born and you were like, now I'm going to be a game designer.
No,
What was your journey into being like, you know what? I want to be creative in this way.
sure. um so that probably requires some context. I've always been
You know, just jump into it wherever you want.
I've always been somebody who enjoys games and gaming. So even as a
Mhm.
kid, I had a subscription to Games Magazine, which I don't even think exists anymore. But back in the day, there was a thing called a magazine, and it would come in the mail. It would have stuff in
Don't hurt me like that.
it.
Don't hurt me by saying back in the day. I had a lot of magazine subscriptions that I don't want to think about that. I still get magazines.
Good. I'm glad they're still alive.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I had a subscription to Games Magazine, and I liked logic puzzles, and I had tavern puzzles, and all of that stuff. So I think it was very primed to to enjoy role-playing games when I finally got introduced to them. And if I recall correctly, it was a family um, friend of my father's who had a kid my age. He brought over, if I remember correctly, it was like the was it the BEM or BIMC or whatever it is, the old boxed sets that were the different colors, the basic, expert, uh, master,
Travel.
yeah,
Yeah, even in
companion,
travel, drop in there.
yeah. And so he brought over the basic box. It's like, is this? And we played around a little bit. I was like, this is awesome. I want this.
Mhm.
And this was probably late elementary school. Um, and so at that point in time, I think I convinced my parents to buy me like one or more of these sets. And I really enjoyed reading it. I learned there was a magazine, Dragon Magazine. So I subscribed to that. And that was how
Yeah.
I got my gaming fix for a long time.
Mhm.
And then finally got to the point where I found enough other people that became this thing. And so it's actually been part of my gaming and role playing games. Have been part of my life since elementary school. Um,
Oh, nice.
and,
Nice, nice.
and
It's
since I
like
was the one with the box
Mhm.
sets and the magazines, I was the
Yeah.
forever DM, and then the
Oh,
forever DM.
yes, yes, yes.
And I think when you're in that role, there's it comes very naturally to homebrew a lot of stuff. So I homebrewed a lot of stuff. And I think the thing I enjoyed about that was the world building and the crafting and the creating and trying to create a cohesive thing. Um, and so I sort of had this idea that one day it would be awesome to publish a game thing. And then it was back during the initial release of the OGL. So way back in the day, when the OGL first came out, during 3 and 3.5 D&D, and the scene exploded
That
because there
goes
was
on
this,
my shelf.
yeah, there was this pent up desire of all of these people out there who have been creating their own products for a very long time, who could now do that in a way that actually allowed them to do that commercially and to either make money or gain recognition. And
Mm.
this was pre-blogging for all the people who aren't as old as I out there. Um, so there wasn't that way of being able to do it. Um, so Green Ronin, uh, they had a system called True 20, they took the D20 system and they stripped the classes out, and then they created like three like meta classes. There was like the expert and then something and something. It was basically a thief, a fighter, and a wizard, but sort of abstracted away from any sort of tropes or any sort of genre. Um, and they held this contest, this setting design contest. And one of the one of the things that you could get as the result of the contest was they would publish your setting in a supplement, and then with the hope that you would then continue to support that setting and they could grow the True 20 system uh, and user base. So I entered. I took the homebrew setting that I had been working on and I spruced it up. And one of the one of the criteria is that you had to have published some other stuff first. So
Oh, wow,
I
okay.
was like, okay, I can do that. And so I grabbed some dungeons that I had designed and you know, productized them. It's taking you get 80% of the value with 20% of the work, but then the other 20% takes 80% of the work. And so I had a bunch of stuff that I had to put 20% in, for my home group. But then I had to take that and turn that into a product. So that was my first exposure to that, of actually taking something and creating it in a way that others could use. Um,
Mhm.
and so then I had to put in the other 80% of the work to get it to that point.
You're like, "Oh, crap. What did I do?"
Right, right. Um, but I published those things. They were called Dungeon Dive. It was like the instead of having this very sort of linear adventure or story based thing, it was supposed to be a tool. What I was trying to do was design a tool for people who are in a similar situation where maybe you don't want to sit down and design the whole dungeon.
Mhm.
You've got ideas, but you just need help getting something out there. And so that's what I did. And had a short run of those products. Um, and then submitted my campaign setting, and they picked it. And so I got published in the Lands of Adventure. I'm looking over my shelf. Something for True 20. So the Land of the Crane, which is a fantasy, high fantasy, as inspired by the myths of feudal Japan, is sort of filtered through
Mhm.
an anime and manga Westerners lens setting. Um, and so that became my first introduction to doing game design. And it was fun. I
Mhm.
enjoyed doing it. And then I was like, whoa, maybe I could actually make this a thing. Maybe I could become be a real publisher, uh,
Mhm.
put on my publisher shoes and go out there and do that. And so I started soliciting writers and artists and whatnot, and did the design myself and published a few more things, and realized I really hated doing that. I didn't.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for not a huge reward.
No, the return on investment is no good. And I was already in technology. So I was like, well, I'm gonna
Yes.
I'm gonna continue to do this as a hobby. Um, and then fast forward 20 years, where I mostly just did role-playing games as a hobby. And I did stuff for my friends. I built out huge worlds. I did other things, but I never tried to get out there and publish. Then I had kids, and I was playing. They were 3 and 5 at the time, so they were.
Mm.
This was back when I only had two. I was like, oh, we could play D&D together, because they want to know, what are those dice Daddy has? Those look fun. Let's play with those. And it's like, okay, cool. And so we
Oh God,
tried.
you're playing with a 3-year-old.
Well, right. So it doesn't matter how much you streamline D&D, you have to get it down to something that doesn't even resemble D&D. It's like,
Mhm.
well, that's silly, and a lot of work and not super fun. So I said, I want to design a system that I can actually play with. And I went through an iteration of a system called Heroic Tales.
Mhm.
The SRD is still out there. I only published one product with it because it did what I set out to do when I designed it, but what I realized,
Mhm.
what I had set out to do was not actually the system I wanted. So um,
Okay.
so that's still, I mean, it's a good system.
Mhm.
It does what it does. It's a dice pool, D6 dice pool system.
Okay, yeah.
A little more traditional in terms of attributes and team-based energy and things like that. You have momentum and initiative and or inertia and such. So that was okay. I play tested that. It's a nice balanced system. It's out there if people want it. Go find the SRD. It's free. It's Creative Commons.
I was gonna say, apparently Mark is using it to write something right now.
Oh,
We'll
really?
find out what it is later.
That's
He
awesome.
said it in the chat. I also monitor like 3 of the different chats,
Okay,
so I'll occasionally interject that.
sure. Um, and then as I was sort of trying to figure out what exactly I was going to do with that, I entered the Ultralight Game Jam, which was an itch jam. It was hosted by Kirby from Disaster Tourism. He's an indie designer.
Okay.
They think he, sorry, they are an indie designer. Um, but um, the idea was build a game that fits in 8 pages, so 4 front and back pages.
Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, design constraint, I can do that. And I had that design constraint, and then I also had my sort of what do I do to get the system that's going to be fun to play with my kids? And so what I ended up doing was creating the verb system as part of this game jam.
Mhm.
And because I had gone through that process already of designing a system once and figuring out what worked and what didn't work, I was able to take those lessons and I think, in a fairly straightforward fashion, craft verbs. And that the first game I published with that was Agent Provocateur,
Mhm.
which sorry, Agent Pervocateur, It is filled with bilingual cat puns. It's about playing secret agent cats. Um, and I play tested it with my daughter. She's like,
Mhm.
oh, and she just immediately got it. Like the system is when you start, you create your character, you write down 3 verbs, and usually I give you a list of verbs to start from to sort of spark the imagination. So you pick those 3 verbs, and those are the things that you're already good at doing. And when you go to do something, you tell me what it is you're trying to accomplish. And if you are using one of the verbs on your character sheet, then you get to add, um, depending on how many check marks you have, you get to add that many check marks to your roll. So you roll a single d6. If you have 1 check mark, you add a 1. If you add 2, you up to
Oh,
3.
nice. Okay. Okay.
So, and the way you get more check marks is by failing your roll. Now, it's a fail forward system. The idea is that your
Mm.
heroes, your action oriented heroes doing fun things. So you're always going to move forward, but a failure costs your team a point of energy. So in exchange for that point of energy, you learn how to do it better next time. And the goal of an adventure is to get through all of the scenes before your team runs out of energy. So that's
Gosh, this is really deep. I'm sitting here and I'm like, you do learn, and it does cost you energy each time. And wow, this is how old was she when she played with you the first time?
when did I release? Look, Agent Provocateur was published in.
I'm also totally going to take this to my gaming group too, because they're looking for I got them together and taught them D&D like not even a year ago. So
Oh,
like it's time to start branching out and finding other things.
and I
So
by no means am anti D&D. I like myself a crunchy tactical combat simulator. Uh,
oh my God. Yeah, Pathfinder?
that's actually we moved on to Pathfinder too. Yeah,
Whew.
um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's fun, and yeah, because
Oh yeah.
my
Every game has its place.
right, my gaming group loves tactical video games, and so we played Final Fantasy
Mm.
Tactics out the wazoo, and all Final Fantasy and all that stuff. So we enjoy that.
Mhm.
But it's also a pain to prep for. It's time consuming. So I appreciate the lighter um, systems as well. So this was 20. So I published this in 2022, so last year. So she would have been. She probably was still 7 when I wrote this.
Okay. So
Uh,
you're teaching a 7-year-old life lessons about spending your energy to learn new things and realizing that even when you fail, you've learned
you've
something.
learned something, and then if you succeed, you just succeed. There's no XP for succeeding. You don't learn anything by succeeding. You get what you were trying to do, but you don't learn.
Mhm.
And then you can also, if you roll high enough, you can get a huge success or a big success, which gains you back a point of energy. So you've essentially gathered momentum, and that's helping to carry you as a team forward. And the energy is pooled. You have as much energy as you have verbs on your character sheet.
Oh.
So as a group, so there's always an incentive to also try new things because that will get you more energy.
Hmm.
Even in the way you gain a new thing is by telling me what you're trying to do, picking the verb you're trying to do it with, and if you fail, then you get to write it on your character sheet. If you succeed, that's your reward, is you succeeded in what you were trying to do. And if you fail, then you've learned something, and now you're better at it than you would have if you had just succeeded at it the first time.
So I'm super curious. You're in software, so I'm project manager, business analyst, to kind of switch hit with those. So I do a lot with teams and team building.
Mhm.
So how much of this idea of team came out of your own personal experiences?
All of it. so, um,
I was like, I've heard this before. Hold on, this is
so
great.
I'm not only a game developer and a software engineer, I also have my MBA, and so
Okay. Hmm.
I've I've done work at the higher levels of the thing. I've probably interviewed thousands of people and hired hundreds as I was building teams.
Hmm.
Um, and I say this not to aggrandize myself, but I was in a CTO and CIO position for a long time too. Uh, and so I've done a ton of team building, and I have gone to school specifically to learn how to be better at doing all of that stuff. And I was just cleaning out my giant shelf of MBA books earlier to make room for more game books.
Because we know it's important, right?
I, I've read those already.
Right. You don't need them now. Now
I'll-
you're
I'll-
using the other team building books.
exactly. So I've read books like the Wisdom of Teams and things like that. And
Mhm.
in particular, that book talks about how if you have a group of people who are all individual contributors and they're working as individual contributors, might be united thematically, but you're going to get a certain maximum level of output. So they call that a working group, not a team, even though people mistakenly refer to it as a team.
Okay,
And then you
yeah, yeah,
have
yeah.
a cross-disciplinary, cross-functional group of people who are working collectively to produce a work product. You get a big lift in productivity over what the individual sum of their parts people can do
Right.
on. And if you have a dysfunctional team that's trying to work there, you can produce less than the people would working. But if you're doing it well, if you're building your team well and properly and doing the sorts of things to facilitate communication and remove obstacles and all, then you can get this high performing team that just there's no possible way that you can produce this thing with just individual people doing their parts. You're really producing something as a team, and you can feel how that works. Um,
Mhm.
I am not a sports ball person, so I did not grow up doing team sports in any way, shape, or form. So really my first experience with the idea of a high performing team, really feeling what that felt like, was actually when I went back to grad school and went to the executive MBA program. And so it was me and a group of other mid to senior level managers and executives who were looking to get that title get that credential and move up. And so we had, um, in my group specifically, I had like one of the vice chairs of a department for the Cleveland Clinic, and I had one of the general managers for a division of Parker Hannifin, which is like a giant multinational manufacturing conglomerate, and I had the controller for an insurance company, and so we had all these people with all these different experiences, and we learned more from each other than we did from the professors in the class, which is by design, by the way. That's the intention.
Yeah, yeah,
But we had to work together they split us up into these groups. We had to work together as a group to produce these team-based products or projects. And feeling like we were working together collaboratively to do this stuff was just a delight. I mean, one, I liked all
Mhm.
the people in my group, but feeling how that felt, it makes you feel part of something in a way that I don't think I had ever felt that deeply before. Um, I mean, I have friends, sure, in my friend group, but this
Yeah.
is different, right? This isn't hanging out with your friends and doing something fun. This is we're working together as a team to build something. And so,
But it
yeah,
becomes that though. Like when you are a part of that high functioning team, suddenly it becomes fun and rewarding in its own way,
absolutely.
so that you really take it to the next level.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
almost like that feeling of flow, but you're feeling it in a different way. Instead of doing
yeah.
individual, you're all building something together, and then the thing comes together and you can see it and you can feel it. You're like, hey, we made this, not just I made this, but we made
Mhm.
this together. Uh, so
I'm really
yeah.
curious. I'm really curious. I want to continue on this. So you said that you haven't necessarily felt that before. I'm curious, thinking back on your D&D games,
Mhm.
if you ever had a moment where you started to feel that with, like, again, it's fun and it's a friend group, but you are
Mhm.
creatively problem solving and you're constantly building your tool set up.
Right.
So like, can you think of a moment that you might have felt that in game?
part of the challenge for me is that I have been the forever DM.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Right? So
You get to watch it. You
I
don't
get to
get to
watch it
partake
happen.
in it.
And so I have definitely seen the group do that, and it's made me
Mhm.
happy to be part of that and to be able to facilitate that. I don't know that I have internalized that, although I will say
Mhm.
this sort of journey off into the indie realm of role playing games has made me appreciate more how the whole group is a team, and the facilitator, the GM, the referee, the warden, whatever, is just one more person who is part of that team. Um, Whereas, if you certainly me coming from a more traditional D&D background, is always the DM versus the players. Um, and I
Yeah, not
think
not such collaborative storytelling then.
no, and I definitely had learned through experience
Mhm.
that that's not actually a great way to do things. Uh,
Right. It took us a little while, but we figured it out.
yeah, right. As a community, we have all been like, oh, hold on.
Yeah.
Um, So I would have to go way back, but certainly I have seen that happen with my
Mhm.
players. And I have felt maybe that's unfair to say that I hadn't really felt that. I don't think I had realized what it was until
Yes.
I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate what it was
Right,
until later.
right. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm a firm proponent that D&D and other role-playing games, like all role-playing games, really prepare us for life in a way, and prepare us to work in teams in a way that nothing else does.
Yeah.
So I'm always interested to see how that translates over into business as I keep telling my team that we need to play together.
I did start at my current place of employment. I did start a lunchtime campaign. We're actually using Cairn. I'm once
Okay, okay.
the warden, the referee. But are you familiar with Cairn?
Nope. Tell me more about this.
So Cairn is a hack of Into the Odd. You heard of Into the Odd at all?
Nope.
Okay, so Into the Odd was written by Chris McDowell. Um, it's it's part of the whole OSR scene, but not like the evil, creepy
Mm.
folks.
Mhm.
the the much more open folks, and it's also sort of falls into, not that OSR and NSR and other acronyms mean anything, but there's like a segment of the OSR scene that's sort of shuffled off into the NSR, the new school revolution, where it's not just about recreating the nostalgic vibe of old
Mhm.
D&D play. It's more about how do we take some of the concepts but apply new modern learning to, all the stuff we've spent 20, 30, 40 years figuring out. How do we apply those lessons?
Right.
So Into the Odd has three stats: strength, dexterity, and willpower. It is a d20 roll under system. So you roll
Okay.
under your stat to beat it.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so they're actually referred to as saves because you only roll if there's something at risk, and then you
Okay.
pick the appropriate one. And so Into the Odd had that. It also has there's no two hit roll. So damage, you always do damage.
Okay.
um, you just roll your damage roll. So assuming that the attack is feasible, you're going to hit, you're going to do damage.
Mhm.
And that I have found, one, speeds up play
Mhm.
by a ton. It's amazing how much that speeds up play.
I'm not surprised. Yes.
But it doesn't really affect the overall lethality. Sorry, my Apple.
That's okay. Mine started doing that too.
So
And
yeah,
usually with like thumbs up, but
yeah, I turned it
what?
off. Let's see if
Okay. It'll do it with hearts sometimes too. If you can get the heart right, there we go.
oh, nice work. Oh, there we go. Yep.
Yeep.
Yeah, they added it in Sonoma, macOS Sonoma. I thought I had to.
Okay, I was wondering because I was doing it and other people weren't able to, and I was like, I think it's my Mac.
Yes. Yeah, it's a new feature that they didn't talk quite enough about, like especially when you're sitting and like, oh, I don't know. a telehealth thing, and you're suddenly doing hearts and thumbs up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
And you're like, oh, this is not what I was going for right now.
sorry, doctor. So so it has those, and it has you there's no 2-hit rolls that speeds up
Mhm.
combat. It doesn't really affect the lethality tremendously.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, 5e are basically superheroes. It's basically fantasy superheroes. But certainly, if you compare it to either earlier versions or even compared to like OSR versions, it's not anymore. Because the math, all you're doing is really just condensing the combat. So instead of all of these misses that string out over time, where we roll the dice, you're like, oh, can't do anything this round. Wait, comes back around to me. Oh, I'll try again. Oh, I missed again. Wait.
Yeah.
You're always doing something.
Right.
And
Nice.
so there are those aspects, and then Karen took that basic chassis.
Mhm.
There's lots of Into the Odd derived games. Um, but Karen is, I think, one of the more successful ones. Took that chassis and welded the inventory system from Knave onto it, which is by Ben Milton, Questing Beast. So you have 10 slots for inventory, and you can carry, they're sort of abstracted. If you have bulky stuff, it carries 2 slots, it takes up 2 slots. And if you have small stuff, you can smush it all into 1 slot. But basically, it's supposed to be like 1 item per slot. Uh, and one of the benefits of that is that you have, you just know what you have. That's your
Mhm.
character sheet. If you don't have it on your character sheet, you don't have it. It's
Have it. Yep.
maybe it's on your wagon or your hirelings, but it might not be available to you right in the middle of combat or doing something daring. Um,
Mhm.
it also has the idea of fatigue. So casting magic and doing other things earns you fatigue, and each fatigue takes up an inventory slot. And so you have to then choose. If you're a magic user, you would have, like 5 spell books and then like 5 slots open to take fatigue every time you try. And that's it. That's all you're carrying. So it helps you focus. It's
Mhm.
super easy to create a character. There are tables for even things like facial descriptions and personality and your background and all that stuff. Um,
It kind of walks you through, but like that's not a bad thing.
I've been doing this game design, and I mentioned it to the people at work, and some of my friends from work are like, "Oh, we should play. Teach us how to play." I'm like, okay. If we're gonna get anything done in an hour, we can't do D&D. So
Right. Absolutely not.
let's do Cairn,
Mhm.
and um, I ordered the books. They're all available, print on demand. Um, they're like $3 each because it's at cost,
Yeah.
and it's a tiny little
Mark
zine.
dumped it in the chat, so everybody check out the chat, and we'll also list it here on YouTube.
Excellent. Um,
So easy.
yeah, so Cairn, I ordered like 6 of them from Amazon. I handed one out to each person. I ordered like a bulk thing of 20 little dice sets with little dice bags, and made a little kit and handed it out to them.
So
And
good.
every single one of them was able to sit down and have a character created without ever having played any role-playing game
That's
before,
awesome.
without any real issues. And we got right into doing the game. Um, and people kept wanting to join. So it's grown a little bit.
Mhm.
But it's easy to get one through. It's easy enough to get through 1 to 2 encounters
Oh,
um,
wow. Okay.
per lunch session.
Hmm.
And that includes having to get in the car and go to get the food and sit down and get everything out. And
It's impressive.
right. And so you can do a ton in a short amount of time. It's very amenable to theater of mind. What I did is I
Mhm.
bought a bunch of meeples because you can buy meeples in bulk on Amazon as well.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so I have the bag full of my dice and the meeples, and so I just sort of put them out. Here are your characters. I give each of them a different color, and they put their initials on it, and then oh, here are the giant rats. And it's not grid based, so you don't have to do exact positioning, but that helped everybody visualize it, especially since we were sitting around looking at it.
Right.
And they did the thing. It's like they played the game with minimal amount of coaching. So I would say that is a testament to the strength of Cairn and other Into the Odd derived systems. It's super easy to get started. It's super user friendly.
That's also a testament to you as a game designer, though, being able to sit down and to walk folks who had not necessarily played games before through this, and to call into your group, bring people into your group.
Yeah, I suppose
Yeah.
that's true.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
it's a forever. Certainly, being a game designer has made me appreciate how each of those different games and systems facilitates different types of play. I mean, there's the whole systems don't matter, people, and that's largely untrue. I would say
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't matter. They matter, but not in the way that you think that they matter. Um, it's like anything. It's a social contract, right? That's this rules. It's how we all agree on the rules of the game to play together, and then you're going to create the rules or use the rules you want for the game that you want to play and the vibe that you want out of what you're playing. And so, yeah, I mean, it was nice to be able to pull everybody together. I think that if we want to tie it back to the things that I've designed, the verbs system, I think also achieves that too, because it largely tries to achieve the same things that things like Cairn and Into the Odd trying to achieve, which is fast, light enough to be able to pick up and run easily. Yeah, I think that's probably the case.
That dopamine reward too, and being able to succeed. And if you feel successful, you're going to continue to there's a momentum that happens when you start feeling successful that does carry over to the rest of your life.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah, I'm curious if you guys have seen an improvement with teams where you're working. With like some measurable statistics to analyze on this now.
Based on the lunch
Yeah,
quest.
based on the lunch quests, I would anticipate that you have facilitated better communication between team members, and you've gotten a boost in productivity that you don't know yet.
That could very well be. I will let you know.
Yeah, update. Go take my professional hat off, put my fun hat back on.
Right, exactly.
So we oh my goodness, and I really want to talk to you about your kiddos too.
Sure.
We had just started touching on this. Tell us about your kiddos. You have 3?
3.
Yes.
They're all so a lot of my impression of my children comes out through, I think, the game of Princess Guard, because that's essentially the game I designed for my kid.
I love that.
So I created the verbs system with Agent Provocateur, and then used that in a couple other things. I tried to see if it could be adapted to other uses, and I then published a game called The Greatest of These is Love, which is a solo game about being a guardian spirit. And then another one called Dead Cleveland.
My brother was telling me about that beforehand.
Oh, really?
Living not far from there, we appreciate that a lot.
It's a zombie survival apocalypse, or a post-apocalyptic zombie survival game.
Or as Cleveland is now.
Zombie infested Cleveland. I mean, you're not wrong.
We still love it. It's still in our state. We haven't given it up to Canada yet.
No, Cleveland's a good town. But anyway, I'm not here to be ambassador for Cleveland. But by doing those, that then got me back around to this game I was designing for my kids. And
Mhm.
what I designed for them was Princess Guard. That was the game I was trying to play. That's what I called it. So this is Princess Guard. Uh,
Cute.
well, you can see
I
the
love that.
princesses. There's one with
Yeah.
a grappling hook. Oh, this is the one with the grappling hook because my oldest daughter became a huge fan of Kim Possible, and Kim Possible has a grappling hook.
Of course.
Of
Yes.
course.
Who isn't?
And so she wanted a grappling hook gun for her birthday. I was like, well, and then my wife was like, well, we could get her just a regular grappling hook. I'm like, no, that's a terrible idea. She's like,
That's a
fine.
great idea.
Uh, so so I wrote Princess Guard for them. I mean, this is their game, really.
Mhm.
Um, and when you create a princess, I have these three sets of words. One is smart, one is strong, and one is sassy. Because those are my kids. They're smart, they're strong, and they're sassy. And
Oh, but
they keep me on my toes.
yes.
All three of them. Uh, the middle one was a big Jojo Siwa fan for a big time, for some time. So my son,
Okay.
who's 3, is now
Mhm.
a giant Jojo Siwa super fan because his sisters love Jojo Siwa. And so, he would be right at home sitting down playing Princess Guard too.
Good, as he should.
Yes, he should. Uh, but yeah, they're good kids. They're smart. Like I said, they're smart, they're strong, they're sassy. That's basically we try and lean into the sass because that will serve them well,
Oh my gosh, yes.
assuming they make it out of the house. All of us.
Assuming you all still have a house when this is
Uh,
done.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, they're all self-possessed, very opinionated. Not There's no hesitation in letting you know what their opinion is.
That's
Um,
amazing.
my oldest daughter does gymnastics. Uh, she's basically a real life ninja, as far as I can tell, because she can do things that I was like, I don't know how you do that. My middle one is the builder. She's the maker. She's going to be an engineer. I have no doubt. Um, she sits down and she just constructs things. It's like, how
Oh, that's
awesome! That's
amazing.
amazing. 3-year-old is a boy, so he is in more. There's a difference, and
Mm.
there's obviously the climatization, the culturation
Mhm.
that we do with kids.
Mhm.
Try not to be, at least in our family, we try not to be like, oh, boys don't, we're definitely not a boys don't play with dolls, girls don't play with, I mean, we don't do any of that kind of stuff. But man, there is a difference between the girls and the boy. The boy just breaks stuff. Like his goal is to be as naughty as possible in order to get you to pay attention to him. And the
I'm gonna say that is a younger brother, 100%. Younger child, just destroy.
like, how can I create maximum trouble?
Hmm.
And he knows he's doing it. I mean, he does it on purpose to get you to pay attention to him, in part because he's got these 2 older sisters who both have these giant personalities. So it's like, how am I each kid, by the way, has been louder than the previous one in order to be heard, and the first one started fairly loud, so it has just gone up since then. um and so, yeah, I mean, he's the kid who's like, I'm just gonna open all the drawers in the kitchen and start pulling everything out, and it's like, buddy.
He is chaos. He is chaos.
Chaos. And he smiles at you, and he's cute, and so he knows he's gonna get away with it.
So your first one's your rogue. Your second one is like your
The wizard.
oh my gosh, like artificer,
Yeah. Yep.
like mastermind. And your third one is either going to be a bard or a barbarian. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. The first one also has a little bit of paladin in her too. She's,
Okay, yep.
you know, we do the right thing and we follow the rules kind of kid. So
It'll change as she gets older.
oh, it's yeah, we're already there. So
All right. Approaching those preteen years. Whew.
um, yeah, it's interesting. It's apparently so the onset of puberty had been dropping over the past couple of decades, I think. And then
Mhm.
COVID bumped it down like another year and a half.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, and especially girls, because they usually start before the boys. It's like 8 or 9 is the start now. What?
Mhm.
Wow, why? Where are these hormones coming from? I don't understand.
Yeah. No, no idea. No idea.
and
And
it,
yeah,
it
a
and it
lot.
doesn't end sooner. I was like, well, if it
No.
starts sooner, does it end sooner? Nope. Nope. Nope.
Nope. 10 years.
Mhm.
You can do it. I'm sure there are support groups.
It's a brave new world.
Oh my gosh.
But
Yes.
they're fantastic kids. They all have giant imagination. My daughter was writing up a choose your own adventure book earlier tonight about zombie parents. And it's like, this is awesome. It's like,
That's
"Hey,
amazing.
we could put that in an actual book and we could publish it and you could have an actual book." She's like, because I know how to do that.
Yeah. I have the keys to unlock your future.
Right. So they're
Or
all,
just make you really proud and feel successful. And
yeah,
again, carry that into your life.
exactly. Yeah, I think everybody can benefit from having a creative
Hmm.
and nobody should expect to be perfect at it. I mean, that goes back to the whole we learn by doing. We learn by failing and picking ourselves back up and trying again. So that's one of
Right.
the things that we do with our kids is to try and teach them resilience. It's not about you can't be perfect the first time out. That's just not the way it
Hmm.
works. And but what's important is picking yourself back up and either trying again or figuring out how to do it or whatever it is. And things like gymnastics, which again, as a kid, I was not a sports kid. Um,
Hmm.
but even seeing how she can practice a certain skill and develop not just competence, but mastery in a particular skill, then I can point to that and say, hey, look, remember how long you had to practice? Did you get it perfect the first time? Were you falling on your face? Did you have to fall on your face 100 times before you got it right? And then you had to do it 100 more times in order to get it sort of right. And then you had to do it 100 more times in order to not, that sort of thing. So I try and do that a lot. I mean, I think things like role-playing games are a great way to explore that in a consequence-free environment, really. You can develop that. Oh, well, it's okay to not do it right. What do we do next? And how do we do something else? And how do we continue to make it interesting?
Yep. Oh my God, I love that so much. Oh, I hate that we have hit 9:59 because
Sure.
I could keep talking to you and I got to zero of the other questions that we
Oh, no,
have.
I'm so sorry.
Why are you apologizing?
Oh,
We had such good conversation.
yes.
This was Dungeons, Dragons, and leadership skills. So that's what I'm here for. Like honestly, this is what this show is about, is just really getting to know and understand the people that we chat with every day online and the people whose games we play, and like really explore ourselves through that and just become better versions of ourselves, shrink our world and become better versions of ourselves. So thank you so much,
Oh, you're very
David, for
welcome.
being
Thank
on
you.
here. So, David, before we end this, where can we find you on the internet, my friend?
You can find me either at carpedavid.com. That is my blog about fountain pens and ink and my terrible poetry and short stories and other things like that. And then amalara.com, Amalara.com.
Okay.
Amalara is my game design studio. And so that is where you can find all of this stuff. Um, Princess Guard and Agent Provocateur and Dead Cleveland and This Mortal Coil, which is my Necromancers in Space
Okay.
setting
I'm
slash
there.
toolkit for liminal horror, which is another Into the Odd derived system.
Nice.
So you can
Awesome.
find,
And we
yeah,
go
yeah.
ahead.
No,
No,
you can find all that stuff and all the links to all the socials and everything right there.
perfect. And what we'll do is we'll also put that under the YouTube for anybody who is looking for that. So thank you so much, David. This was absolutely delightful. If you want to stay around, we usually jump over to the general chat, and we'll do that
Sure.
right over here. More reasons for you YouTube watchers to hop on in and join the Nightcast Creative Discord. We would love to have you. We would love to meet you like this. It's super fun. So friends, thank you so much. We'll be back next month talking to Kim, who's also on Discord. So now we smile and wave. Say goodbye, David.
Bye, everyone.